Welcome back to our Mackinac Moments as we are now joined here on the porch of the Grand Hotel by Dennis Archer Jr. of Ignition Media Group. Good to see you again, my friend.
It's good to see you, man. This weather I can't believe we're sitting outside. The sun is out. It's 60 degrees. I'm looking at the bridge. This is fantastic.
And you and I both have been here fighting snow flurries before for this event. I'm really curious about what your take is right now. It's interesting. There's a fair amount of pessimism in numbers because of, we look at the way people feel, and we looked at that poll and it showed us that lots of concern about inflation and lots of concern about the economy, and yet you start drilling down and you ask people one-on-one at this thing, how are things going for you? Everybody's telling me, really good. So there seems to be a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde here going on.
Well, it's interesting. It's kind of like the tale of two cities. And so I think national unemployment's around 3.6. We may be a little bit higher in Michigan, but we know as employers that we have open positions that are very hard to fill. And so for me, whether that be in our hospitality business or in our warehouse and distribution business, we've got open positions, and I think that we're paying competitive wages, and it's hard to get people to come and take these jobs. I had a conversation a little while ago about someone in the legal field who's trying to hire lawyers into the firm. And now, when lawyers can now, in many instances, depending upon what they do, if they're not going to court, Devin, they can work from home. So you can get hired by a LA firm or a New York firm and make LA and New York wages and live in Detroit. And so it's just the whole marketplace for talent. Throughout this whole weekend, talent has been a theme, and I think that's the biggest challenge. We'll get beyond COVID. We've learned a lot about it. We will eventually get beyond the supply chain challenges that I've had and many people, particularly those of us in the automotive industry, have had. But talent, it's changing permanently, and it's evolving permanently. It's not going back to the way it was. And I think that's the one area where we have to adjust. And when I talk about the tale of two cities, you know, there are companies here who've been on stage that said, hey, during COVID, we've had our best years. But you got people that are spending $100 to fill their gas tank too. And so now they have to decide, can I go to the grocery store or should I fill my tank so I can go to work and take my kids to school? So that's the challenge we're facing.
Yeah. We're seeing some real push while we all adapted to working at home, and that was employers and employees alike. We're seeing some pushback now from some bosses who want people in the office. We know Elon Musk this week tweeted out, if you're not back in the office here by such and such a date, I'm going to assume you no longer work here.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, he can maybe make that proclamation because maybe he's providing those people with stock options and they're there on the if come. But for those of us who are not Elon Musk, if I was to make that proclamation, I might as well swing the door open and help and escort people out, because employers are no longer, in most industries, are no longer going to be able to dictate that people come to work for 40 or 50 hours a week in the workplace. Those days are over. Now again, there are some industries where it actually does require, but for those that don't, we're not going back to that.
It's an interesting problem for then, say, the city of Detroit, which relies on people coming into the city to work.
Yes.
And then going home, and by doing that, you pay city income taxes. If you work from home, you don't.
And oh, by the way, if you don't come down to work, then you're less likely to come by restaurants downtown for happy hour or for lunch.
Exactly.
And so
this is a really tricky needle here.
Yeah, and it's a vicious cycle because we work very well with Bedrock. You know, they're our landlord at Central, and they would like us to open back up for lunch. And so we're saying, well, there's not enough people downtown. We don't think to open up for lunch. And then they say, well, in order to get people to come back to work, the amenities have to be back open. So it's like, who's going to give first?
Yep.
And so it's very tricky. And for those of us in hospitality particularly, you don't want to get yourself into a losing proposition.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out over the course of the summer months.
Yeah. What are you finding are the biggest changes that you've had to adapt to after COVID that, as you just said, are permanent? What are the biggest ones for you?
I think that people have gotten used to being at home with their families and being there if someone needs to go to the doctor or a child is sick, or just wanting to be home, particularly when their kids were home from school. And so people really want to be part of their family. That family, the work-life balance is really blending, in my opinion. And so it's very hard to keep the two separate. Even if people come back into the office, people are running out more to do more personal things because they got used to doing that for 2 years. So I think that's one. Two, it's just finding people. I mean, I've got a number of different industries within which I work, and across the board, it's just hard to find people to come to work. And
is it existential?
You know, I don't know. I wish I could, because they have to be doing something.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. They can't. Everyone's not flocked to any, I don't think, particular industry. Because again, we've got hospitality, we've got marketing, and you know, we've got warehouse and distribution. And across the board, it's an issue.
Is it an existential threat to you to stay in business and open, I guess is what
No.
It's not
it's not to that point.
Yeah.
It's taking longer. Here's what is happening. It's taking longer to fill roles. And so when there's a gap, so let's just say one of my clients has a team of 5 people, and that team may be operating right now with 3.
Yeah.
And so those 3 people might be working 60 hours a week.
Yeah.
Well, that's untenable. And so they're going to get burned out, and then that may cause, you know, someone else to start looking. And so that's the issue. It's not a threat to the business, but it's a threat to the quality of work life.
Yeah.
Which ultimately, I mean, it's not going to shut the business down, but we're having to look at really non-traditional ways to go after folks. I mean, we're offering incentives to existing staff to bring folks in for interviews and that sort of thing, because using the Indeed.com and what we normally would do that got us results, it doesn't work fast enough for us anymore.
Not fast enough.
No.
Funny. That was its stock and trade originally.
Right, exactly.
Indeed was like instantaneous,
Instant, right.
And now it's not fast enough. Yeah. Lastly, you understand the dynamics of a lot of conversations going on here about inclusiveness.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
and sharing in what's going on in Detroit. If you were to give us a report card right now, because we started talking about this a long time ago,
we did.
and then COVID wrecked maybe a fair amount of progress or stopped it at least for a while. Where are we now?
Well, I think there's multiple different measures. I mean, as we look at the work that we do with the Chamber, and I chair the Racial Justice and Economic Equality Committee.
Yeah.
And so there are multiple measures. There's supplier diversity, there's development that goes on, there's access to capital. And I think that, number one, it depends on who you ask, because there are some firms that are doing very well. And I think what I've learned up here from conversations I've had, Devin, is the one thing that for minority-owned businesses that we can do better to help is to get them just in the room. Get into the room where the decisions are being discussed, opportunities are discussed very early on, because oftentimes when people hear about opportunities, it's too late.
It's done.
And so whether that's, you know, traditionally at a golf club or, you know, at the racquetball court at the DAC, wherever these conversations are being had early on, there needs to be more inclusivity there.
Yeah.
Because so I think things have gotten better. I think one of the local business trades had a front page story about how particularly African American developers are doing bigger deals, more substantial deals, and they're doing them themselves, not in joint ventures. And so I think that there's a plus there. We did a poll prepared to come up here, and 83% of the people or so, 60% of the people said that their business, and these are all African American owned businesses, were growing at the pace with the rest of the economy. 18% or so said access to capital is getting better. And so I think things are improving. I think that when George Floyd happened, there are a number of our local larger institutions that made certain proclamations about what they were going to do differently.
Yeah.
And I think many of them have, all of them have not, but many of them have made those strides, and I think we're seeing the benefits of that now.
You win for best dressed this week.
I'm trying, man. You look, man. You with these shoes, I don't know.
This is amazing what you got on. Dennis Archer Jr., it's always good to talk to you, pal. We'll see you back down south, of course, soon. Keep it right here. More of our Mackinac moments coming from the Grand Hotel.